I remember the smell first. Burnt oil, sweat, the copper tang of blood baked into metal. That was the scent of our rebirth, the birth of soldiers in the service of the Imperium. They stripped away everything human on the first day. Our names, our hair, even the way we spoke. We became designations, numbers carved into data slates and flesh alike. The sergeant said names were for civilians. Out here, only survival mattered, and survival had no identity. The training fields were a world of ash and concrete, surrounded by walls that stretched so high they swallowed the sun. Floodlights replaced daylight. Sirens replaced birdsong. Every sound became mechanical. Even our breathing fell into rhythm with the machine. Sleep was a privilege granted only to the obedient. Meals were tasteless rations that smelled of solvent. The instructors claimed it built discipline, but what it really built was emptiness. They didn't want soldiers who thought. They wanted weapons that obeyed. Each morning began with the same scream of klaxons and the thunder of boots. We ran until our vision blurred, until our lungs became open wounds. When someone collapsed, they were dragged aside and replaced without pause. The medici servitors didn't treat, they salvaged. Flesh could be repaired after all. It was cheaper than training a replacement. Weapons training came next. We learned to strip a laser gun blindfolded, to fire while crawling through mud laced with wire and shattered glass. The instructors walked among us like vultures, their augmetic eyes scanning for hesitation. Hesitation meant weakness. Weakness meant punishment. I still hear the clicks of their boots on ferrocrete. That sound burrowed deep into the skull, a rhythm of fear that drove us forward even when our bodies screamed for rest. At night, the barracks became tombs filled with exhausted breathing. No one spoke. No one dared. The walls had ears. Servo skulls drifted overhead, their lenses glowing red in the dark. Rumor said they recorded every whisper. If you spoke against the training, you vanished. Simple as that. Sometimes, during lights out, I'd stare at the ceiling and wonder what was left of the person I'd been, but the thought never lasted long. The next siren always came too soon, tearing dreams apart before they could form. The commissar arrived in our third week. He didn't speak often. He didn't need to. His presence alone carried the authority of death. One recruit laughed during roll call, a nervous chuckle maybe, or madness setting in. The commissar turned, drew his bolt pistol, and fired once. The sound was thunder. The boy's body hit the ground before the echo faded. The commissar holstered his weapon and said, "Discipline is mercy." Then he left. We cleaned the blood ourselves. No one laughed again. The weeks bled into months, though none of us knew exactly how long it had been. The clocks were meaningless. The sun was something we saw only in propaganda posters. Our world existed in shades of gray, gunmetal, ash, and blood. When combat simulation began, the air changed. They brought in live rounds. Real explosions. Real fear. The first time I felt the heat of a plasma discharge near my head, my instincts screamed to flee. But the instructors had already taught us. Instinct is the enemy. You obey the command, not the fear. We fought through smoke and debris, stumbling over the bodies of fallen trainees. Med servitors patched them up or didn't. It hardly mattered. The objective was completion, not survival. By then I'd stopped counting how many had fallen. We weren't brothers or comrades anymore. We were parts of a machine, interchangeable, expendable, replaceable. The Imperium didn't need heroes. It needed cogs that never stopped turning. Sometimes, in the rare silence between drills, I could hear the distant roar of manufactorums, the endless heartbeat of the hive beyond the walls. I wondered if those workers knew about us. Probably not. We were ghosts even before we died. Then came the night the storms hit. Toxic rain hammered the barracks, leaking through cracks and staining everything a sick green. Lightning flared above the walls, illuminating the training field like the surface of a dying star. We stood at attention for inspection, rain burning our skin, boots sinking in mud. The sergeant walked the line, silent, until he reached me. His face was half metal, one eye a cold red lens. He leaned close and whispered, "If you survive this, you'll never be free again." He smiled, and for the first time, I realized he wasn't warning me. He was promising it. That night, I stopped dreaming altogether, because in this place, dreams weren't permitted. Only orders, only the grinding of flesh and steel. They said the real war was waiting for us beyond the walls. I used to believe that, Now I know the real war had already begun, inside us. When the first live deployment orders came through, there was no announcement, no ceremony, just a flicker of red light in the barracks and a voice over the intercom. Report for transportation. Full combat gear. No exceptions. We didn't cheer. We didn't speak. We just obeyed. The dropships waited for us like iron coffins, their hulls scarred and blackened by years of service. The engines screamed with a pitch that felt alive, like some caged animal begging to be unleashed. We filed in, one by one, our boots clanging on the ramp. Laser guns clutched tight enough to leave marks on our palms. Inside, the air was thick with oil and fear. A tech priest moved between us, his face a maze of tubes and bronze wiring. He blessed each weapon with sacred oils, whispering binary prayers to the machine god. The hum of his vox voice was almost soothing, until he looked at me, his mechanical eye whirring, and said, "Flesh is weakness. Do not fail the steel." The hatch slammed shut, and then there was only the sound of the engines and the pounding of my own heart. The descent was violent. Gravity tore at us, metal screamed, and someone vomited in their rebreather. No one reacted. We were already dead, only our bodies hadn't realized it yet. When the doors burst open, we were greeted by chaos. A world of smoke and ruin stretched before us. Buildings half-eaten by fire, skies thick with ash. The air tasted of metal and sorrow. Somewhere in the distance, artillery thundered like the heartbeat of a god. Our orders were simple: secure the outer manufactorum district and purge all resistance. No details, no names. Just a target and the promise of death. The first time I pulled the trigger, I felt nothing. The las bolt cut through the gloom and struck a figure ahead, human, maybe, or something less. It fell, twitching. My mind registered the action, but my soul stayed silent. The instructors had done their work well. The battlefield was a nightmare of flickering light and screaming metal. Walls bled sparks. The ground was slick with oil and blood. Servitors moved through the haze, repairing machinery even as bodies piled around them, as if death itself were just another system fault to be corrected. We advanced through corridors of flame. Every shadow looked like an enemy. Every noise made us flinch. When the explosions came, we didn't duck and we just kept moving. The commissar's voice crackled through the vox, calm and cold. "If you falter, you die. If you flee, I will make it so." We didn't falter. We didn't flee, not because of courage, but because fear had become our oxygen. Hours or maybe days passed like that. Time lost meaning. The sun never rose. The smoke never cleared. The manufactorum was a maze of shattered machinery and whispers, human voices begging for help that never came. Once, I found a child among the rubble, face blackened by soot, eyes wide with terror. I hesitated, just for a heartbeat. The commissar saw. He didn't speak, didn't shout. He simply raised his bolt pistol and fired. The child fell, and the sound echoed through me like a curse. Then the commissar turned his gaze on me. "Mercy," he said, "is treason." And then he moved on. That night we made camp inside a collapsed hab block. The fires burned low, casting long shadows across the walls. No one talked. We just sat there, cleaning weapons that no longer looked like tool. They looked like extensions of ourselves. The tech priest passed among us again, his metal limbs clicking softly. He examined each of us with cold precision. When he stopped in front of me, he whispered something in a language I didn't understand, a blessing maybe, or a curse. Then he touched my chest just above the heart. With a metal finger that hissed with heat, the mark it left still burns. When sleep finally came, it wasn't peaceful. I dreamed of gears grinding flesh, of faces melting into iron. I woke to the same sounds, screams, distant gunfire, the endless hum of the machine. By dawn, or what passed for it, half our platoon was gone. Some had fallen in the night. Others were simply missing. The officers didn't ask where they'd gone. In the Imperium, soldiers vanish all the time. The war eats them, and the machine keeps turning. As we prepared to move out again, I caught my reflection in a puddle of rain and ash. For a moment, I didn't recognize the face staring back. The eyes were hollow, the mouth expressionless. That's when I understood the truth. They hadn't trained us to fight. They had trained us to become something else entirely. Tools of a god that no longer remembered mercy, and I was starting to forget it too. We moved through, the ruins like shadows, silent, cold, and mechanical. The screams had become background noise, the thunder of distant guns a kind of lullaby. Somewhere along the way, I stopped counting the dead. There were too many faces, too much ash. The world itself had turned gray. Command said we'd secured the manufactorum district, but there was nothing left to secure, just burning towers and piles of what used to be people. The air shimmered with heat and radiation. Even the crows had stopped coming. Our squad was smaller now, 12 men out of 50. We were ghosts held together by habit and fear. When we spoke, it was only to repeat orders. When we slept, it was with one hand on the trigger. The machine never rested, neither could we. Then the orders changed. No more clearing buildings, no more patrols. We were being sent underground to locate and neutralize whatever was disrupting communication signals below the city. It sounded simple. Nothing ever is. The descent began at dawn. The entrance was an old cargo shaft that led deep beneath the manufactorum's foundations. The air grew colder with every step, thick with the stench of rust and decay. The walls were slick with condensation and something else. Something that looked like oil, but wasn't. Our lights flickered. The deeper we went, the less the Vox worked. Even the tech priest grew quiet. After the second kilometer, we started finding signs of movement, footprints, torn fabric, smears of blood along the walls. Then came the whispers. At first I thought it was the wind, but the air down there was dead. No wind, no life. Just the echoes of something that shouldn't have been there. Private Loran panicked first. He dropped his weapon and started muttering prayers, clutching the aquila around his neck. Before anyone could stop him, the shadows took him. One moment he was there, the next gone. The Vox crackled once, a burst of static that almost sounded like screaming. Then silence. We found his body an hour later, or what was left of it. His armor was twisted, crushed inward as if by immense pressure. The tech priest ran a scanner over it and said only one word: corruption. None of us asked what he meant. We already knew. The tunnels grew narrower, the light dimmer. The walls began to hum, faint at first, then louder, a pulse that matched the beating of my heart. It felt alive, as if the very stone was breathing. The further we walked, the harder it became to tell where the sound ended and our thoughts began. Then we reached the chamber. It was vast, a cathedral carved into the bones of the world. Machinery hung from the ceiling like chains, dripping oil onto the floor below. At the center stood a column of pulsing light, rising into the darkness above. The tech priest fell to his knees, his vox trembling as he whispered, "The machine spirit, it's awake." But what stood before us wasn't holy. It was wrong. A living engine of flesh and steel, its surface shifting like liquid metal. Faces moved beneath it, screaming soundlessly. Every instinct told me to run. Every order told me to stay. Then the light flared, and everything changed. The Vox exploded with static. Our helmets filled with whispers, voices of people long dead calling our names, begging for help. I tore my earpiece off, but the voices didn't stop. They were inside my head now, crawling through the cracks of my mind. Someone opened fire. I think it was me. Las bolts burned across the chamber, hitting nothing. The light pulsed in response, and a wave of energy threw us to the ground. The tech priest screamed, his mechanical limbs twisting against his will as if something was rewriting him from the inside out. One by one, my squad broke. Some ran, some fired blindly. Others just fell to their knees, whispering prayers to anything that might listen. But nothing listened. Not here. When I came to, the light was gone. The chamber was silent. Only 3 of us remained. We dragged ourselves back to the surface through corridors littered with bodies that hadn't been there before. Their faces were frozen mid-scream, their flesh half fused with metal. I didn't look too long. Some of them looked familiar. When we finally emerged into daylight, or what passed for it, the world felt different. The air was colder, the skies darker, and in the back of my mind I could still hear it. A faint rhythmic hum, the sound of the machine breathing. The tech priest was gone. So were the others, only I remained. And somewhere deep inside I knew I hadn't come back alone. Because when I closed my eyes I could still see that light, burning, endless, whispering my name. When I returned to the surface, the war was still raging. Artillery echoed through the distance, and the sky burned with a color I had never seen before. Not red, not orange, but something in between. Like blood reflecting fire. They said I'd been missing for 3 days, but I knew that wasn't true. Down there, beneath the manufactorum, time didn't move the way it does up here. It stretched. It broke, it bled. The medicae examined me when I came back. They said I was fine, heart rate steady, neural signals stable. But I could feel it. Something inside me had changed. The pulse of the machine still echoed in my veins. Whispering through every heartbeat, they reassigned me to the front line almost immediately. The regiment needed men. And I was still a man. At least that's what the paperwork said. But when I looked at my reflection in the transport's window, I saw something else staring back. Eyes too dark, skin too pale. The faint flicker of static behind the pupils. I told myself it was exhaustion. I told myself I was still human. But deep down, I already knew the truth. The next battle was worse than anything before. The enemy came out of the ruins like shadows given form. Men twisted into monsters by radiation, their minds long gone. We opened fire until the barrels glowed red, but they kept coming, crawling through fire and shrapnel. The commissar's voice cut through the noise. "Hold the line. The Emperor is watching." I wanted to believe him. But the Emperor hadn't watched us in a long time. The world around me dissolved into motion and screams. The ground shook as tanks rolled forward, their treads crushing bone and steel alike. Overhead, gunships rained fire upon the ruins, turning stone to dust and men to ash. I moved without thinking and firing, reloading, advancing. Every shot felt rehearsed, as if my body remembered before my mind could command. At some point, I realized I no longer felt fear or pain or anything at all. Something inside me had gone silent, or maybe something else had started speaking louder. During the chaos, I found a fallen comrade, Loran, the one who'd vanished in the tunnels, but it wasn't him anymore. His flesh was gray, his veins traced with faint lines of circuitry. His mouth opened, and through the static I heard the same whisper from below. "The machine remembers." He reached for me, and instinct took over. I fired point blank. The lasbolt tore through his skull, but the whisper didn't stop. It echoed in my head, steady as a heartbeat. When the fighting ended, there were no victors, only survivors, broken, bleeding, hollow-eyed. The manufactorum burned behind us, casting a red glow across the horizon. Command called it a victory, but the word felt meaningless. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the light again, the column of living energy pulsing in the dark. I heard the voices, the hum of gears grinding in rhythm with my pulse, and then I realized I could hear something else, a transmission. It came through the Vox at first, faint, buried in static. But when I removed my earpiece, I still heard it, inside my head, a code repeating endlessly. 1-1. A1-1. I didn't understand it at first. Then I recognized the pattern. It was a name. Mine. The next morning, the commissar came to inspect us. When his gaze fell on me, he paused. His expression flickered just for a moment, then he said, "You shouldn't have come back from that place." I wanted to ask what he meant, but before I could speak, he drew his bolt pistol and stopped. The weapon's targeting light glitched, its power core whining. Then, silence. I looked at him and he lowered the gun. Not because he chose to, because something inside it obeyed me. That's when I knew. Whatever the machine had done down there, it hadn't just whispered, it had listened, it had learned. And now, it lived inside me. Weeks have passed since then. The regiment has moved on, leaving the ruins behind. But I can still feel the hum beneath my skin. The rhythm of metal and memory. Sometimes, when I speak, the Vox crackles with echoes of voices that aren't mine. Sometimes, the servitors turn their heads when I walk past, as if recognizing one of their own. Maybe that's what I've become. Something between flesh and code. A fragment of the machine's dream, wearing the shell of a man. I no longer pray to the Emperor. I no longer fear death because I've seen what waits beyond both. Down there, in the dark, something woke up. It called to us through circuits and blood, through steel and prayer, and now it watches through every lens, every cog, every heartbeat of the Imperium. The flesh will fail, the spirit will fade, but the machine remembers.